Hello and welcome to this episode of Counsel Trends. I'm Dr. Shanae Anderson with my beautiful partner, Dr. Mercy Connors. And I'm just wondering, Mercy, have you ever been in a long-term relationship other than your marriage?
Yes.
Was it easy for you to get over, or did it take time?
I guess it kind of depends.
Yeah.
There were definite times when it was, harder, especially in certain seasons of my life where maybe I didn't have as many friends or my family wasn't around or something like that. That would have made it harder, but then there were times that it was really easy. I was like, I do not want to be married to you.
Well, it's not like you were married before.
Right, exactly.
Well, what we're talking about today is really kind of breakups and how long does it take to get over a relationship? And I know that's a question that I have so many of my patients and friends that always ask. And, the general rule of thumb that I hear is that it takes half the time of the relationship to get over a breakup. So if you were together for 2 years, it takes a year to get over it.
Right.
And we're actually going to go over an article today that kind of challenges some of wisdom.
I have to admit, this thing blew my mind on so many levels, like so many things that I thought I knew about attachment and relationships. I'm like, wait, what? Like
It's a good paper.
It's really good, yeah.
So what we're going to be covering today is an article entitled The Long-Term Stability of Affective Bonds After Romantic Separation. Do Attachments Simply Fade Away? And you can access this article. It comes from Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, and it came out at the beginning of 2025. And really the question is, at the end of a relationship, do the attachment bonds kind of slowly fade away, or do they just kind of end?
Yes. Is there a kind of a severing, like a detachment is what it talks about actually in the paper. And that I found actually very interesting. I don't think I ever thought of my dating relationships as attachment bonds, but after reading this, I'm like, oh, yeah, they really were. They, security seeking, secure base, proximity seeking behavior. When there was trouble, who was I going to go and talk to? Yeah, that really did make sense.
Well, and that's where I know whenever I talk to somebody about, is this relationship an attachment-based relationship? I always think okay, if something bad were to happen to you, who would you call? Who would be those top people that you would reach out to? And those are the people that you really have the closest bond with.
Right.
And they tend to be family. They tend to be romantic relationships, sometimes even besties like us, because I call you. Anyway, so this article really wanted to look to see if there is, I liked how they called it, an imprinted quality to attachment. So basically that you almost imprint upon each other.
Right.
And that once the relationship is over, that attachment behavior is still present.
Right.
Or does it gradually kind of go away?
Yeah, kind of they talked about it as decay, which I thought was a great kind of way to think about that.
To think about a breakup as decaying
Yes.
and deteriorating. That does sound kind of good. They also looked at a number of moderators, which I think is really important because if you're going to be looking at relationships, there's so many factors that are going to determine how long it's going to take for you to kind of get over that relationship.
Right. And I think that's everybody's ultimate goal when there is a breakup, is that getting over part. Okay, when am I going to be done feeling yuck?
Yeah.
So I think this was a really good article that explains that.
And the 3 potential moderators that they used in the study, they mentioned a number of them, but the 3 that they looked at, which I think are really critical, are attachment styles, how the relationship ended, basically who was the breakupper and who was the breakupee, and whether people had entered a new relationship.
Yes.
Which I thought were 3 interesting moderators.
Yeah, and I think it was also, they talked later on that they did some other moderators too, just to make sure that they weren't getting any kind of cross-contamination type of thing.
Right. The other 6 ones that they decided to add were whether people had continuing ongoing contact with their exes, whether there was continued face-to-face contact, whether they had children with their exes, gender, whether they considered the relationship to be a significant one, and whether they'd had a continued desire to be with their ex.
Right. Which I feel like those would be very helpful to understand and parse this out.
Yeah. So what they did is they had 328 participants, 57% were women. Average age was 32. Do you want to go through kind of what their other stuff about them?
The participants were predominantly single, about 37%. Married was 23%. In an exclusive and committed dating relationship was 19. Divorced or separated was 10. And then there was an other. I know. That was 11%. I'm like, I feel like this is it's complicated situation.
I bet you're probably right. I wasn't even thinking of that. Yes.
Which I found that really, really interesting. But anyway, they go on and explain that pretty much everybody had a relationship that the breakup had been within the last 5 years. And the relationships tended to last for 2 years.
No, 4.5 years.
4.5 years,
yes.
That's right.
So that's why originally I had misread that it was 2, but it actually says that on average, they had a 4.5-year relationship. And that it had been at least 5 years since the breakup.
So when you're thinking about that, that's a long
That's
relationship.
9.5 years.
And then that's a long time to get out of, to get away from it. So that
is interesting also. If you think about these individuals, average age was 32.
So 9 years.
So we're talking almost like someone in their early 20s.
Or in their
for a 4-year relationship, 4.5-year relationship. It's now been 5 years to see, are they still attached?
In my 20s, I was not having these long relationships like this.
Yeah, I don't think I was either.
No.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, staying power. There you go.
More will be revealed. So what they did is they started off by measuring attachment with 2 different attachment questionnaires that assess people's thoughts, feelings, and inclinations with respect to using ex-partners to fulfill attachment-related functions, which I thought was interesting. Like you're saying is, I don't know, especially if somebody's asking me about an ex, if I would see them through an attachment lens.
Yes.
Which maybe speaks to the fact that they do end. So I'm not quite sure. But what they were looking at is to compare your attachment needs and like putting those attachment needs on an ex versus a stranger.
Yeah. Well, that actually, I liked that one.
I thought that was interesting. Why don't you explain that?
Well, I think that what they were trying to get to, it was a theoretical 0 is what they were trying to get to. Like, if I didn't know Shanae at all, how attached would I be? Would I be proximity-seeking behavior? Would I see you as a secure base? Like those types of things. If you're a stranger and I don't know you, the likelihood is there's not going to be any of that type of behavior. So that's where they're coming to this theoretical 0 of, and let me just say this was a whole bunch of math, and let me tell you, I didn't understand it. But apparently that's what they were going for. And I liked that there was this theoretical 0.
Because I think they were also saying that you may still like think about your ex in like a kind way, but it wasn't necessarily like attachment driven.
Right. You weren't actually looking for them to fulfill needs. Is basically what they're going for.
And so what they decided to look at is how those attachment scores related to the different moderator variables that they looked at.
Can I just tell you the first thing that came up? And all y'all, I hope you're sitting down. Okay. By around the 4-year mark, the average person reached a point at which they are halfway to relinquishing the bond fully. 4 years.
And that is huge. And that's only halfway. So we need to like have a big timeout, pause.
That means you're going to be 40 before you actually let it go.
But if you do think about that, so if the average length in the study of the relationship was essentially 4 years.
Yes.
And they're saying it's going to take 4 years to be halfway done.
Yes.
That means it's going to take 8 years So I'm wondering, the person who's been speaking about that it takes half the time of the relationship to get over somebody, maybe they goofed, because it sounds like it's going to take twice the time of the relationship.
They're bad at math like me.
They're going to that is like profound.
Seriously. Like when I really think about that, that's like 10% of your lifetime.
True.
To get over a relationship. So you're talking about a 4-year relationship, then it takes you 8 years. That's 12 years of your life.
It's a very long time.
It's a huge amount of time.
Which also is interesting, and I know that they talked about it here in the results of, is somebody, I've not seen this much, is somebody going to wait those 8 years until they're completely detached before they're going to start dating somebody else? People would get married at like 75.
Yeah, that's a definite no.
Yeah, so what is going on? Do you think that being in a relationship would shorten this time? Do you think it has an impact?
Well, we're about ready to find out.
We're going to tell you.
I think that it's really interesting that we're talking about detaching fully. So this is where, again, they go back to that theoretical zero. Now, I think that there comes a point in time when they're detached enough. You know what I'm saying?
To consider somebody like a stranger. Like you were just somebody that I used to know, that song.
Or you know, again, I'm thinking back to myself. And I'm like, I remember myself, and when I would have those feelings of wanting to go back to an ex, I would actively push them away. Like I would be, you know, Facebook stalking, and I'd be like, all right,
no,
I'm done. I cannot look at this.
And that was 8 years after the breakup.
Jeez, seriously. So that's what I'm saying is, like, I almost think that there might be a detached enough, and that would have been an interesting part of the study.
That would be, because you're right. Basically what we're saying in theory is people are not dating until they're completely over someone and detached. And clearly we know that can't be happening.
Correct.
Which is very interesting if you can imagine how many of us are still attached to our exes as we're entering into these new relationships.
Yes.
And what did our study show about that, which I thought was interesting, was that entering into a new relationship did not moderate the extent to which people's attachments to their ex changed over time.
Shocked.
It has no effect on that.
Like, I literally put down here, wow. Like, really?
So basically what it's saying is that, okay, I've broken up with you. We were together for 4 years. It's going to take me 8 years to get over you. I'm about 4 way in.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into another relationship, and that's not going to impact my detachment from someone else.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. Do you think so? My question again, if there's a case of an emergency, who am I going to call?
I'm certainly not calling my ex while I have somebody else.
But if that person is still not a stranger to you, you still have that attachment bond, which makes sense to me why people get so jealous of exes.
True. But I also wonder, like, if you have a list of all the people that you know, they probably just moved down the list, right?
Depends on how many exes you have. I mean, I know I dated a lot, so I've got quite the little long list going on there. But again, that's where I just don't think, I don't know if I felt really so much attached to them.
Yeah.
And so this is where I am wondering, and I wish it had been a little bit more clear. Are they really talking about relationships like a marriage?
Right.
Which I can understand because they are talking about children and having an ongoing relationship with your ex.
Right. And, you know, we're talking about trying to get to a zero, right? So I'm also wondering, too, like, if this is somebody that you went to high school with, that's a lot of, like, history.
Right.
And there
especially early formative history.
Right. And so there might be some of that as well of, I don't look at you anymore as, like, an attachment figure, as in, like, I love you, you know, I want a relationship with you, but as in, hey, you're somebody I knew, you're somebody that was special to me at one point in time. I can have an okay relationship with you. Like people that have relationships with exes afterwards, that has always boggled my mind.
Well, but let's talk about that because I do think that is relevant here.
Right.
So
it's boggled my mind, so you're going to have to explain this.
Does Jesse have attachment relationship with any of his exes?
No, because I don't allow that.
And do you have any attachment relations with any? Because he wouldn't allow that either. So then the question is, where does that attachment go?
That's a good question. I guess it decays and
slowly decays, but that's where I'm wondering if it doesn't decay any quicker because you're in a new relationship.
Right.
Where does it go?
I don't
out into
I don't
the
know.
world.
Yeah, where does that go? And I guess that's where I'm talking about now I'm directing this, like I'm purposely directing that behavior towards Jesse, towards my husband, and...
But you're still not considering your ex as a stranger.
Correct. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think Jesse and I were in a very interesting situation where we had dated people before. Both of us got out of relationships, and it had only been 2 weeks before we met.
Oh.
So, I mean, yeah, right? Hadn't decayed very long. But I don't know about him, but I think I can say based on what I know about that relationship that neither one of us saw the person that we were currently dating as attachment-based figures.
Well, and as you know, in my case, with my current husband, both of us were divorced.
Right.
And I don't think either of us had an attachment to either of them. And then I lost my first husband. He died.
Right.
And that was interesting. And even the article addresses how death can even impact the level to which you still remained attached.
Right. So I do think it also depends on at what level you saw that person as an attachment figure. Because like I can say from my experience, I did not see the person I was dating as an attachment figure, even though we had been dating for 8 months. Now that tells you a little bit more about the relationship than,
But it brings up one of the moderators that they talked about, which was attachment styles.
Right, yes.
And that result did not surprise me at all.
No.
And what they found in this study is that individuals who were who had an avoidant, dismissing attachment style actually were able to get over the relationship a lot quicker.
Which makes complete sense
Because we know that those dismissing, avoidantly attached individuals don't really like to attach in the first place.
Right.
And so when something ends, I can imagine that they're very good at shutting it off.
Right.
But on the flip side, the fearful preoccupied, the anxious preoccupied really took even longer to get over that. And speaking as a former anxious preoccupied, oh my gosh, breakups were the worst for me.
Right.
Because I just held on to them for so long because there was something stabilizing in the attachment.
Right. Now, was that different for you if you did the breaking up as versus being broken up with?
Which is a really good point. And I think the study also noted that was a big difference, that people who did the breaking up got over it quicker than those who were the breakupees. I was kind of pathological back in my dating years, and so I would actually get broken up with. I would it was very not healthy. And so I wouldn't do the breaking up. I never wanted to be the bad guy. So I would create the situation to be broken up with, probably so I could be an eternal victim, which I do not recommend. Thus, the importance of the many, many years of therapy I had to endure to work on my relationship style and my attachment style, which is much better now.
Right.
And I no longer have to hold on to my attachment figures forever.
You're right. But I do think we need to talk about gender, because that was a very interesting moderator as well. Now, if you're listening to us, just take a moment. Which gender do you think has longer to decay,
takes longer to decay, or maybe can get over it quicker?
Yes.
Do you think that men can get over a relationship breakups faster than a woman, or do you think a woman can get over faster?
So when I thought of this, my guess at the beginning was men get over it faster.
I can see why you would think that. I actually wasn't surprised by the results. The results basically show that there was no gender difference at all. And I think I used to always see gender difference into things that now, instead of seeing it through a gender lens, I see it through an attachment lens.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of times we assume that more men are more avoidant and that women are more anxious and preoccupied. And so but I wasn't surprised by that.
I wasn't thinking of it through an attachment lens. I was thinking of it more as like emotional. Men
can just move on.
They're less emotional. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I was thinking of it. But that to me shocked me. Now, here's another interesting fact. Do you think that it is harder for people to give up relationships when they have children or less hard?
I think it would be much harder because you're still interacting with them.
Right. And from the relationships I've seen with kids, I'm like, nope, that one's easy.
And what did it show in here? Remind me that one.
It showed that those that had kids, the relationship decayed quicker. So the attachment decayed quicker.
So how do you understand that?
Because there's so much arguing. Okay.
So much contention.
In parenting is hard to do no matter who you are, what the situation is. But if you are detached and there maybe has a bad breakup, or even if it wasn't a bad breakup, it's just there's hurt feelings.
And it's hard to co-parent when you're not under the same roof.
Right. Or even that now maybe there's multiple different roofs, right? Because now think about if there is
step-parents, boyfriends, girlfriends.
Yes. So then, of course, I think, and therefore then you see that person maybe making choices that you don't like.
Well, being married to a former Disneyland dad, and oh my gosh, now I understand what you're saying, that it's very easy to say, I can't stand what you're doing because you're making me crazy.
Exactly.
Parenting in ways that I don't approve of or don't like.
Right. And there's nothing you can do about it because you have to parent with them.
Yes.
And that person can make you mad and they don't care.
So the moral of the story...
There's lots of
if you want to get over your relationship with someone quicker, have an avoidant attachment, have children with them. What else? Be the breakup-er, not the breakup-e.
Exactly.
And then you'll get over in shorter than 8 years.
That's pretty much what it said.
Otherwise, if you're not in that perspective, it's going to take a long time.
And I think also one of the morals of this story too was don't try to jump into another relationship to make it easier for you to disconnect because it's not going to work.
Well, and that's one of the other ones in here is I think it even said that continuing to even have contact with somebody, like a lot of people are like, well, let's just be friends. That'll make the breakup a lot easier because we'll still be talking and it won't be difficult. No. That does not work either. It actually keeps the timeline going.
Yep. And in-person versus online is the same. It's the same. Like
if you're just like talking on the phone versus seeing them in person.
Yeah. So, I think my way was the best. You're out of my life, done. I don't talk to you.
2 weeks later, I'm getting married. I think
that's not quite how it works. I think
that this issue, I think, is one that's very important because I do think relationships are so important.
Right.
And I think it speaks to the fact that, we do really bond in romantic, relational relationships.
Yeah.
And that it is going to take a time to let it go. It's not going to go like that. It's going to take a while.
And give yourself time. Like there are times where you do have to grieve the relationship. That was the other thing. I do want to talk about the whole death aspect because they did not cover death in this article, but they did say that it needs to be an aspect of the next type of research to see when you give up a relationship versus a relationship detaching because somebody passed away. And we have different ideas on what would happen there. But I think that also really, that's a completely different detachment as compared to somebody decided this was no more.
Well, I think a lot of times when someone dies, you want to hold on to them in your heart.
Yeah.
Versus a bad breakup, you really don't.
Right.
And you're doing whatever you can to excise them out.
Well, and a lot of times there's not a choice in that. neither person has a choice in that. And I
Yes.
feel like that makes that situation a lot different.
Mhm.
But I hope that you really enjoyed this article. I know we did. We enjoyed talking
We were
about
surprised.
it. And please give us a like if you enjoyed this information. Of course, give us a comment. If you have something that you want us to cover, we would love to know what you're interested in. And of course, always know that we love being a part of your life.